Hello, welcome to our department leader training on development of coaches and how do we do that well here at New Life. I'm bringing a good friend and mentor on. This is Mark Howe. He's a discipleship pastor. Is that your official title? I should know this, but I don't. At Canyon Ridge Church in Las Vegas. What's your real title, Mark? I should know these.
Currently, it is the engagement pastor, and that includes that other aspect.
So there you go. I apologize. I should know that. But Mark, you and your years of ministry, you've probably have developed over 1,000 coaches, I would guess, and beyond that, just your extended ministry to the church, you've helped thousands of people lean into this idea of a coach. And so, as we talk about this idea of as a department lead, leading a coaching, who are leading leaders, and now down to team members, Mark, what's the most significant thing we need to understand as we move from a coaching role into a department role about the difference between the two? Because they are pretty significant.
Yeah, I think, Zach, and we didn't talk at much length about, your structure and kind of the specific role of the department leader. But in my experience, one of the things that happens, and it actually is related to what happens when someone maybe has been serving as a leader and then reaches a stage of their ministry where they would maybe be invited to be a coach. The difference between those two is somewhat akin to the difference between a coach and maybe a department leader. So I kind of think about this whole sort of relationship between them as I learned a long time ago from someone that I was listening to, that one way to look at this is kind of in the sense of the story that Jesus told multiple times in the Gospels, where he told the story of the farmer who sowed the seed, and some had a 30-fold return, some had a 60, and some had 100. And I've used that little metaphor literally hundreds at least, or maybe thousands of times, that I've talked with different pastors and people in small group ministry to say, look, you could take all of your current leaders and without doing any further work, you could just run a mental evaluation on all of those leaders, and you would be able to figure out, of those leaders, which ones would you say are 100-fold people? And it's, I've sometimes said you could lock them in a room for a weekend and they would figure out who is really the leader of them. There's a capacity. It's not about maturity. It's about just kind of the innate capacity that the seed had and the leader has. And, my example, I always think about 3 guys that were in my ministry at Fellowship of the Woodlands in the early 90s. And I mean, those guys, there were some guys in that group that just, they were head and shoulders bigger from a leadership standpoint than the other guys that were in that room. And then there were some people that, honestly, if you took out the 100-fold guys, and men and women, you took them out and you said, how about the rest? There would be some 60-fold people that, compared to a normal, ordinary leader. So to me, what it is that it's this sense, I think it was John Maxwell that said it first in my hearing, that, there are some people that the way they're shaped, they might be in the sense of the way John Maxwell was talking about it, sort of a 1 to 10 kind of ranking. And the reality is, if you have a 7 or a 6, they are not going to be led by another 7 or a 6. They're going to be led by a 9, or an 8. And, that's the way I think about it. So in answer to your question, how do I, what's the difference between a department leader and a coach? I think there is a skill set, there might be a personality ingredient, but in some way I'm looking at it and I'm saying, for example, here at Canyon Ridge, in order to be a coach of coaches, is essentially what it is. In order to be what we would call a division leader, you have to have enough going for you to where when you do the same things that you're doing from a coach to a leader, you're able to influence that that coach in a way that really will be helpful to them. I remember when as we moved from 15 to 18 coaches, we reached a critical point where I knew enough about Carl George's theory of the kind of the Jethro principle, that I could not lead 18 coaches. I couldn't invest in them in the way that I needed to and wanted them to be influenced. And so I recruited 3 out of 18, and that was the beginning of that sort of division leader.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah. So as I become a department lead, as I'm walking through this training to step into, how do I, so I've been a coach, or maybe I've kind of moved up, or I'm coming in from the outside, I'm this department lead. What should I look for in a person to make them a coach? How do I discern? How do I engage? What words of wisdom would you have?
Yeah. One of the things I would say, and this might be, for some, it may be counterintuitive to think this way, and others, they might just kind of go, oh yeah, that's obvious, duh. But one of the things that I noticed was I began to see people who were leading groups that were leading them so effectively that the group was growing and it was vibrant, and it was the group everybody wanted to be part of. It was the group that really seemed to get how do you care for the members and things like that. And I can remember saying to Janet and Keith Sherman, when we had the conversation, I said, you know what, you guys are so good at it. In some ways, it almost feels like sort of a mismanagement of your capability to allow you or encourage you to stay as a group leader. Because if you took that those same ingredients and invested instead in group leaders instead of members, you could have influence over 60 adults or 70 adults in that many families. That would be a powerful thing, don't you think? And so that, to me, I began thinking about who are the people who are currently serving as a leader, for instance, who, in a sense, because they're functioning as a leader over 12 or 15 or whatever it is, they're, they're sort of misappropriating the gift that they have if they could move into the coach role. And what I would say is, by the same token, there are people that are going to serve as a coach that you're going to say, you're doing a great job, but I think you would have more influence, more impact by moving into this role as a coach of coaches or a department leader of coaches.
Yeah. So when you, how do you know when a leader is ready to make a jump from just being a leader to that coach? How do you discern that?
Yeah. And what I would say is you can't discern that unless you're close enough to them to know certain things. First of all, one of the things that I say a lot of times is, in order to be really an effective coach or an effective department leader, you need to be in a role where you can be both fruitful and fulfilled in doing it. And so, because there are some people, I think they have the innate or the natural skill set to do it, but it's meaningless to them. It doesn't float their boat. It's the wrong ministry or the wrong area of ministry. So they're not ever going to be fulfilled in doing that. They might be fruitful, for a season, but
Hmm.
out is coming. The other way exists too, where they might be really fulfilled in having the name tag,
Hmm.
and being seen as a department leader or a coach or whatever, but
Hmm.
they're not fruitful, And
Hmm.
so when I'm talking with leaders and considering them for the role of a coach or coaches, and I'm considering them for the role of the department leader, step one is if I'm the one making those calls, I need to know them well enough to
Hmm.
know the answer to that question. I
Hmm.
mean, it's do they really have what it's going to take in order to be fruitful?
Hmm.
And is it something that they really can invest in? You can't get that from a survey.
Hmm.
That can only come mano mano,
Yeah.
as we're talking about it, in my opinion.
Yeah. I really appreciate that because it's so easy to look at ministry where it's on a flow chart or number chart and go, okay, I need one person here, so who can I pull there? But what we're talking about, this difference of being in a department leader role, it really is that relational component, and
Yeah.
make sure your span of care is at a healthy balance where you can actually really know and not be so busy with doing so many things that you actually don't know your people. And so I really do
That's right.
appreciate how you say that.
Yeah.
Mark, you've shared with me as you walk through this, you've had a lot of coaches that have been successful, and you've had some coaches maybe not go so well for you. What are some common reasons coaches don't work in your experience?
I think the most common reason that they don't work, and by the way, one of the things that we've tested and kind of used for many years, both here at Canyon Ridge and in other places that I've served, is the idea that um, a test drive is a good way to start. I mean, so in other words, when I'm recruiting someone to help coach some new groups or something to that effect, a lot of times I will not call it what it is. I'll just say, hey, we're starting this. Would you mind taking some of your expertise and just kind of take a couple of these people under your wing?
Mm.
That's the thing. So we often start with a test drive. I don't know that that's in the cards for your pipeline, but
Yeah.
one of the things that we learned from that is um, proof really is in the pudding, you know.
Mm.
And so there are people that talk a good game, that say the right things. They've learned to say the right things, and they're not bad people. They may eagerly want to help, but not have, at the end of the day, they may be a 30-fold person who has passion for the ministry, but not the innate kind of DNA
Mm.
to function in that role of a coach or of a department leader. So one of
Yeah.
the things is, it's just the wrong role for them. And so, one of the principles that I always try to persuade people to put into their thinking is start with a test drive. Give them some way that they can try this out, and you can evaluate them on the front end. I think another reason that people fail at it is that the modeling that they had in the beginning was not accurate. In other words, I think a lot of churches have tried and failed to put in a coaching structure or a leadership pipeline. And the reason for their failure is that what was modeled in the very beginning was not really what you want them to do.
Mm.
It may be more about, like I've said many times, one of the main reasons coaching structures fail is that what's being promoted to do is more or less function as an accountant. How
Yeah.
many people were in the group that week? Was the apprentice present? Those kind of things. That's not really coaching. That's
Yeah.
some form of accounting. I don't know. Those I think are the two biggest things. There's poor modeling that sets it up, and you could see how this runs through the pipeline.
Mhm.
That's why what happens from a coach to a leader or a department leader to a coach is so important, that it be personal in nature, and
Yeah.
really about development, relational development. I think
That,
that, yeah, that piece is those two aspects are the biggest reasons.
you said that. I'm going to ask a question just to make sure you say it again, because I think what you said there is so important. The most significant thing a department leader can do for their coach is what?
I think, dude, I kind of have a shorthand for it, and I say all the time to do 2 and 4, and with the coach, whatever you want them to be doing 2 and 4, and with their members,
Yeah.
or the leaders of their
Yeah.
hub. That is, compared to anything else, there's not anything, no other responsibility comes even close to that as an important thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate just you sharing your wisdom and helping us as someone moves maybe from a coach or comes from the outside and comes to step into this department lead. We talk about this development of coaches and this coaching level. It's really helpful. So I appreciate your wisdom and insight here. Thank you.